The stench of mildew hit Janet like a wave as she pushed open the basement door. Cool, wet air clung to her arms as she flicked the light switch. The bulb above buzzed, flickered once, and cast a sickly yellow glow across the narrow stairwell. She hated this part of the house. Always had. The walls were lined with chipped concrete, and the old boiler in the corner wheezed like a dying lung. Her late husband used to call it the underworld, half joking. But now she descended alone, slippers catching on the cracked wooden steps. Behind her, heavy work boots echoed more confidently. "Mind if I take a look around?" the plumber asked. His name was Russo, mid-50s, tired eyes but a steady hand. He gave her a nod before crouching beside the old utility sink that had started dripping 2 days ago. A slow leak, but one that had started pooling under the washer. "I've tried every wrench I've got," Janet said, wrapping her cardigan tighter across her chest. "Thought it was just a bad valve." Russo grunted as he examined the piping. "It's old, all right. Probably hasn't been replaced since Reagan." He tapped the rusted elbow joint with his wrench. Something metallic clinked behind the wall. Janet froze. "Did you hear that?" Russo nodded, setting his tools aside. "That didn't sound like a loose pipe. More like a hollow cavity." He ran his fingers along the baseboard behind the sink. The wallpaper there was curling from moisture. With a short flick of his wrist, he peeled it back, revealing a warped wooden panel underneath, aged and water-stained. His knuckles rapped against it, hollow. "You want me to see what's behind it?" he asked, tone softening. Janet hesitated. Her mouth had gone dry. "Go ahead." He wedged a screwdriver into the seam and pried. The panel groaned as it came free, revealing a narrow cavity packed with dust, and something else. Boxes. Small cardboard boxes stacked neatly behind the wall. None of them had been there when she and her husband bought the house 30 years ago. That much she knew with a bone-deep certainty. Russo reached in, brushing cobwebs aside. "These look like file boxes," he muttered. "Heavy." He pulled the top one out and laid it gently on the ground. It was plain brown, sealed with aging masking tape. Janet knelt beside it, heart thudding. Her hands trembled as she peeled the tape back. Inside, papers. Dozens of them. Some crisp, others yellowed with time. There were notebooks, too. Composition style, with worn black and white marbled covers. She picked one up. On the front, in neat block letters, "Tommy's Journal, 2007. Her breath hitched. She flipped it open. The handwriting leapt off the page. "Mom says I need to stop talking about the room, but I can still hear him in there." Janet recoiled. Her mind raced, blood roaring in her ears. She grabbed another notebook. "Katie, private. 2011. The entries inside were full of drawings, dark, violent images. One showed a figure trapped behind a wall, mouth sewn shut. Another, a basement staircase with red marks trailing down the steps. "What is this?" she whispered, voice nearly breaking. She opened a manila folder buried beneath the notebooks. Inside were Polaroids, photos she had never seen before. Her children, young, maybe 8 or 9, posed in front of the fireplace. But their eyes, they looked hollow. Like something was missing behind them. Russo knelt beside her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She barely heard him. Her eyes were locked on the last image in the folder, an old floor plan of the house, sketched in graphite. But there was a room drawn behind the basement wall that wasn't in the blueprints she remembered. A cold wave crashed over her. Her skin prickled. She looked at Russo. Can you break through that wall?" He hesitated. "If it's not load-bearing, sure. But are you sure you want to?" She clutched Tommy's notebook to her chest. The words swam in her head. He said if we told, he'd bury us behind the furnace. Her hands went cold. "I think my kids were hiding something from me," she said, voice shaking. Something terrible. From behind the wall, a faint metallic clatter echoed, like something shifting inside. Russo turned sharply. "Did you hear that?" Janet didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around the notebook. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "What have they done?" Janet stood frozen, the notebook clutched tight against her chest like it might leap from her hands. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. Russo exhaled and straightened. "You want me to start checking for studs behind that wall? I can get tools from the van." She shook her head too quickly. "No, no, we don't even know what this is. Someone could have left it before we moved in." Russo looked at her, unreadable. 30 years ago? She tried to force a smile, but it cracked halfway through. People stash things. Could have been a tenant. Squatter. Maybe this house had a past we didn't know about. Russo rubbed his jaw, his gaze drifting back toward the open cavity. "All due respect, ma'am, but those notebooks had your kids' names on them. Dates, too. This isn't from some squatter." Her heart thudded like a warning bell. I don't think we need to dig up any walls," she said quickly, too sharply. "I'll go through the boxes myself. You've done enough." He nodded, but didn't move. "These papers don't belong here. Whatever's going on, it's not plumbing." Janet looked away. "I'll take it from here." Russo lingered a beat longer, then gathered his tools in silence. His boots thudded across the cement and up the stairs. A moment later, the basement door creaked shut, leaving her alone with the smell of mold and memories. She knelt again, fingertips brushing the next box. Her throat tightened as she peeled it open. Driver's licenses. 5 of them. All with her name, Janet Hale, but different addresses, different states. Ohio, Michigan, Maine. None current. Each laminated and glossy, tucked in plastic sleeves like collector's cards. Beneath them, envelopes, bank statements, pages of overdrafts, bounced checks, and accounts she'd never opened. There were credit cards with her name, but numbers she didn't recognize. Expiration dates long past. Some statements had red stamps across the top. Final notice. She tried to swallow but couldn't. What the hell is this? The second box was worse. Letters. Hundreds of them, neatly bundled in twine. She picked one at random. The return address was from a bank in Tulsa, another from Boston, then Phoenix. All addressed to her. Some unopened, others slit cleanly. Inside, each letter carried a thread of the same narrative. Unpaid balances, property liens, requests for follow-up on phone calls she'd never made. She gripped the edge of the sink and steadied herself, the weight of it all pressing down on her chest. Her kids had been teenagers when these were dated. Sophomore year, senior year. Right around the time they stopped telling her things, when they got secretive, distant. Could they have... No. No, she whispered aloud, shaking her head. They wouldn't do this. The thought turned sour in her gut, but still she clung to the denial like a lifeline. A knock at the back door jolted her upright. She shoved the box back into the cavity and slid the panel halfway shut. The rusted edge caught her palm, drawing a thin line of blood. She sucked in a hiss and wrapped it in her cardigan sleeve as she climbed the stairs. Carla stood on the porch, holding a Tupperware dish. "I made too much chili again," the woman said with a smile. "You look pale. Everything okay?" Janet forced composure into her face. "Fine. Just fixing a leak in the basement. You know this house. It's always something." Carla handed over the dish, glancing inside. "Is that your plumber's van out front? Thought I heard drilling." Janet nodded, already stepping back. "Yeah, he's just packing up." "You sure you're all right?" Carla frowned. "You're shaking." "Must be the draft down there," Janet said. "Appreciate the chili." She closed the door before Carla could reply. In the kitchen, she leaned against the counter, heart racing. Her hands felt foreign. She looked down. Blood had soaked through the sleeve. She stared at the red smear like it belonged to someone else. That night, the house was too quiet. She lay in bed, eyes wide, the ceiling fan slicing shadows across the plaster. Moonlight spilled through the blinds in fractured lines. From somewhere deep in the walls, she thought she heard it again, a faint metallic clink. She pressed her hands over her ears, but that wasn't what haunted her. It was the voices. Not loud, not even distinct, but real, whispered, close. "Trust us, Mom." The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. Behind the vent, under the bed, inside the closet door that wouldn't shut all the way. We had no choice. She turned on the bedside lamp, panting. Nothing. Just the ticking of the wall clock and her pulse in her throat. Her eyes drifted to the hallway where the basement door stood barely ajar. The air was cooler now, and somewhere, something was breathing in the dark. The next morning, Janet sat in her parked car outside David's house. Fingers wrapped around the steering wheel like it might take off without her if she let go. The neighborhood was neat. Too neat. Fresh blacktop. Trimmed hedges. One of those developments where every house looked copy-pasted from the last. David's colonial was painted navy with white shutters, a matching Lexus in the driveway. The lawn looked like it had been buzzed with military precision. The kind of place that said, "Everything here is in order." She took a breath and got out. David answered the door a few moments after she rang the bell. He looked startled, like someone had knocked who wasn't supposed to exist anymore. His tie was half knotted, dress shirt wrinkled at the elbows. "Mom?" he asked, smile tight. "Everything okay?" She forced one back. "Just thought I'd drop in. I was already out this way." His hesitation lasted a beat too long. "Sure. Come in. Sorry, the place is a little..." He trailed off, waving vaguely at nothing. Inside, the air smelled of cologne and something else. Metallic. Stale. The living room was sparsely decorated. A leather couch, abstract prints on the wall, an untouched coffee table book about architecture. "I don't think I've been here since your promotion party," she said. David nodded, motioning for her to sit. "That was almost 4 years ago." She eased into a chair. "Time flies." He moved to the kitchen. "Coffee?" "Sure." From where she sat, she could see part of the counter, gleaming granite with nothing out of place. No dishes, no clutter. It felt staged. She turned her head slowly, scanning the room. Framed photos lined the hallway shelf. Him, alone, in front of corporate buildings. Another with an ex she didn't recognize, but no pictures of family. Not her. Not Lena. Not even childhood ones. The silence stretched. David returned, handing her a mug. "It's decaf, trying to cut back." She took it, watching him over the rim as he sipped his own. He kept looking at the clock above the fireplace. "You working from home today?" she asked. "I took the morning off. Zoom call later." She nodded, letting the quiet settle again. On the far side of the room, a drawer sat slightly open on a console table. She didn't mean to look. Her eyes just drifted. Inside, she caught the corner of a thick envelope, postal markings in red ink. Another below it, then another, unopened. Her hand tightened around the mug. "You been getting a lot of mail lately?" David didn't miss the glance. He walked to the drawer and shut it quickly. "Just junk. You know how it piles up." Looked official. He bristled, then caught himself. "Mom, I'm doing fine." She blinked. "I didn't say you weren't. But you're thinking it." His voice cracked a little, then steadied. "This isn't an interrogation. Is there a reason you're really here?" She studied him. Tall, polished, charming when he needed to be. But now, his smile had seams. I just wanted to see you, she said softly. You've been hard to reach lately. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. He glanced down. It's Lena. She watched him answer, tone flipping effortlessly. Hey. No, just talking to Mom. What? No, I told you I'd cover that. Don't worry about it. Yeah, just send me the link. Janet stared straight ahead. Her blood turned to ice. He ended the call and set the phone down casually. She's always panicking about bills. She asked for money? He shrugged. It's what she does. She'll pay me back eventually. Janet sat straighter. You've been helping her out for a while? David frowned. Is this why you came? To dig into our finances? No, she said quickly. It's just, you both seemed okay. I didn't know. We are okay. But he wouldn't meet her eyes. She stayed another 10 minutes, sipping the lukewarm coffee, making shallow conversation about work and the weather. David never asked why she had really come. He didn't need to. As she pulled away from the curb, her stomach was a knot. The neat house, the fake smiles, the hidden mail. And Lena, asking for cash like it was a routine transaction. It didn't fit. Not with the boxes, not with the journals. She tried to push the thought away, but it came clawing back. Had they been using her? Back home. She parked in the driveway but didn't go inside right away. She sat there staring at the porch. The Tupperware dish from Carla still sat on the steps, half finished. She looked at the house differently now. Every window, every brick, every shadow on the siding. There was something buried here. Something deeper than secrets. Something she had let fester. Her hand twitched on the keys. She thought again about the voices. Trust us, Mom. She didn't. Not anymore. Janet cleared the kitchen table with the urgency of someone preparing for surgery. The chili sat untouched in the fridge. The blinds were half drawn. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the branches of the dogwood. But inside, everything was still, like the house itself was holding its breath. She brought the boxes up from the basement one at a time, setting each gently on the linoleum floor before unpacking them. The documents inside were brittle, edges curling with age, ink faded to a sickly brown in places. She handled them like bones. One by one, she spread the contents across the table. Her name was everywhere. Janet Hale, Janet C. Hale, Mrs. Hale. The names were hers, but the loops and slants in the handwriting were not. She picked up a loan agreement first. The amount was enormous. 6 figures. Co-signed in 2015. That was the year after her husband died. The signature at the bottom looked eerily close to hers. Same flick at the end of the T, same slight upward slant, but it wasn't her hand. It was too clean, too controlled. It didn't shake like hers had that year. Another document. A mortgage refinance for a property in Portland she had never even seen. Her name. Her social security number. A forged signature dated 6 months after the funeral. Her breath hitched. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth, trying to calm the scream building in her chest. More forms. IRS notices, car loans, medical bills. All of them linked to her. And all of them stamped with a signature that only looked like hers. Then, as she lifted a folder labeled Medical Proxy, something snapped inside her. Flashback, 2014. David, in a black suit, standing at the edge of her kitchen. He looked exhausted, eyes rimmed red from the funeral. She had been sitting at this same table then, body sagging into the chair like someone had taken out her spine. "Let me help, Mom," he had said gently. "You don't need to deal with this right now. Just sign a few things. I'll take care of the paperwork. You need to rest." She remembered barely registering what was in front of her. Her hand shook as she scrawled her name on the dotted lines. The pen fell from her fingers when she was done. She had trusted him, because he was her son, because he knew how things worked. because she had no reason to think he'd use her grief like a crowbar. Back in the present, she sank into the chair and gripped the edge of the table. The grief she thought she'd buried with her husband had returned, only now it carried teeth. Not some mistake. Not a misunderstanding. They had used her, lied to her. Bit by bit, year after year, they had bled her dry in ways she hadn't even felt happening. The rage came in pulses, thick, rising waves that nearly drowned her. She was shaking when Carla tapped lightly on the glass door. Janet barely registered the knock. "Hon?" Carla said, letting herself in. "I came by to see if you'd eaten." She stopped short at the sight of the table, documents spread in a chaotic quilt, sticky notes blooming across the wood like bruises. Carla's eyes darted to Janet's hands. They were trembling, one still clutching a folder like a lifeline. "My God," Carla said softly, "you look like you've seen a ghost." Janet's voice was barely audible. "They've been living off me." "What?" She blinked slowly. "David, Lena, since Harold died. All this time, they've been siphoning my life out of documents I never read." Carla stepped forward. "Janet, are you sure?" "I signed one power of attorney. One." Her voice cracked. "The rest? They forged. They built lives on me, houses, cars, loans, lies." Carla knelt beside her, her voice low and careful. "Do you want me to call someone? A lawyer? Police?" Janet didn't answer. Her eyes had gone to the corner of the table where a yellowed sheet lay half unfolded. A college loan application with her signature beneath Lena's name. She reached for a pen. "No," she whispered. "I'm calling myself." Carla tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Janet pulled a notebook from the kitchen drawer, the same kind she used to keep for grocery lists and birthdays. She opened it and began writing. March 2015, David refinances house. June 2016, Lena opens joint checking account. July 2017, IRS audit letter, never seen. Each line dug deeper, like etching names into a gravestone. "I'm building a timeline," Janet said quietly. "Not for the police. Not yet. First, I need to understand what they took. When? How?" Carla stood, unsure of what to say. Janet didn't notice her leave. Her hand kept moving, page after page, memory after memory, lining up the invisible dominoes that had knocked her down. And at the center of it all, her signature, not hers, a forgery with her face. The neighborhood Lena lived in was the kind that had a name with the word estates in it. Even though all the houses looked like they were dropped from the same architectural cookie cutter. White stucco facades, curved driveways, lawns trimmed so perfectly they felt synthetic. Janet pulled up behind a glossy black BMW, its rear bumper peppered with boutique gym stickers and a tiny dent that someone had tried, and failed, to cover with a flower decal. She walked slowly toward the front door, taking in the rows of hydrangeas and the silver door plate. The Burkes. Lena answered on the second knock, barefoot, clutching a glass of wine. "Mom." "Wow, this is unexpected," she said, drawing out the syllables like a performance. She wore soft makeup, a loose cream blouse, and yoga pants that probably cost more than Janet's washer. "I figured it was time I dropped by," Janet said calmly. "Well, come in before the HOA has a heart attack." Lena stepped aside. They complain when people just stand around. Inside, the home was staged like a real estate listing. Open concept, gray and white everything, candles flickering on a spotless island. A wine fridge hummed beneath the counter, glowing softly. Janet took it in quietly. "So," Lena said, pouring herself more Pinot. "What's going on? You look tense. Everything okay with the house? That place still leaking?" Janet kept her smile tight. "Nothing I can't handle." "Good," Lena said breezily, hopping up to sit on the edge of the quartz counter. Because you know I can't be running over to Pittsburgh every time you forget how to flip a breaker. Janet tilted her head. No need, you've already taken so much off my plate. Lena didn't catch it, or pretended not to. I've been so slammed, you have no idea. Between Mason's school and the fundraiser, I swear I've barely had time to eat. Do you know we're hosting a wine tasting here next week? 30 people. Janet watched her daughter sip from a crystal glass, legs dangling like a girl playing dress-up. Sounds expensive, she murmured. Lena waved it off. It's all networking. You have to put something out to get something back, right? She hopped down. Actually, wanna ride with me to the mall? I need to pick up the shoes I ordered. They texted they're ready. Janet followed her into the BMW. At the designer boutique, Lena swept through racks like a woman who had never considered price tags. The shoes, pointed black leather heels, waited at the register. The clerk rang them up. Lena pulled out a metallic credit card with a flourish. A pause. The terminal beeped. Declined. Lena's smile didn't falter. Ugh, this card's been acting up all week. She slipped it back and pulled out another. Try this one. Approved. She gave the clerk a dazzling grin and turned to Janet with an easy laugh. This bank's a mess, she whispered as they walked out. They keep flagging my card for suspicious activity like I'm some kind of criminal. Janet's smile didn't move. That must be frustrating. Oh, it's a nightmare, Lena said, climbing back into the car. I swear, I need a personal assistant just to keep up with it all. Back at the house, she offered Janet a kombucha from the fridge. You really should think about moving out of that house, she said casually, eyes scanning her phone. I mean, it's falling apart. And let's be honest, it's depressing. Janet sipped her drink, watching Lena scroll through Instagram like the world outside didn't exist. Some people are still drawn to old things, Janet said, voice even. They don't see ruin, they see memory. Lena gave a theatrical shrug. You're allowed to romanticize the past, Mom, but maybe don't live in it. Janet set her glass down gently. I should get going. Lena kissed her cheek at the door, already distracted by a text. That night, back at the kitchen table, Janet pulled out another manila folder. Inside, a student loan package co-signed in 2016. The college listed wasn't one Lena ever mentioned attending, a beauty school in Arizona. The signature at the bottom, her own again, or what looked like it. But this one was sloppier, the handwriting not quite as clean. They were getting lazy, Janet realized. Or desperate. She flipped to the next page. Another loan. This one for a vehicle purchase. A BMW. Her pen tapped the edge of the paper as something settled deep in her bones. Not grief this time. Not betrayal. Something colder. Sharper. Lena wasn't out of control. She was comfortable. Janet leaned back and looked around the kitchen. The sticky notes from her timeline covered the wall behind her, growing like mold across the wallpaper. This wasn't just fraud. It was orchestration. Every loan, every forgery, every transaction had a pattern. They hadn't just been living off her, they had built their lives on top of her corpse and left her breathing underneath it. She picked up her notebook again, but this time she didn't write dates. She wrote steps. Janet hadn't been to Tommy's place in almost 3 years. She remembered the general area, past the old train depot, near the strip of shuttered storefronts and check-cashing spots, but the exact turnoff felt like it had vanished with time. She circled twice before spotting the cracked mailbox with the number 1411 peeling off in sun-faded plastic. The apartment building sagged inward like it was tired. Peeling paint, warped gutters, a busted security buzzer someone had fixed with duct tape and a handwritten, "Knock hard." She did. After a few seconds, the door creaked open. Tommy stood in a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans, barefoot, blinking like he'd just woken up. His hair was longer than she remembered, curling around his ears. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there at graduation. "Mom?" "Hi, sweetheart." He glanced behind her like he expected someone else. "Is everything okay?" She smiled gently. "Can I come in?" Tommy hesitated, then stepped aside. The inside smelled faintly of burnt coffee and dust. Dishes were stacked in the sink. An old leather couch sagged in the middle. Posters half peeling from the walls. A bookshelf leaned against the corner, crowded with thrift store paperbacks, a few vinyl records, and a lava lamp that hadn't been lit in years. It was the kind of place that hadn't been decorated so much as survived in. "You want tea or something?" he asked, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm all right." She sat on the edge of a dining chair, careful not to move the half-folded laundry stacked on it. Tommy sat across from her at the table, fiddling with a coaster. "How have you been?" she asked. He shrugged. "Work's been slow. Been picking up shifts at the shop on 5th when I can." Janet nodded. "You still drawing?" Tommy's eyes flickered, then dropped to the table. "A little." She looked around. No artwork in sight, no sketch pads, just bills, unopened, a few fast food receipts and a crumpled flyer for a pawn shop. He wouldn't look at her. She leaned in gently. "Tommy, when your father passed and things got complicated, I didn't ask a lot of questions. I trusted you all." He swallowed hard. "Okay. But lately I've found some things," she continued, "in the house. Old boxes hidden behind a wall in the basement." Now he looked up. A flash of something crossed his face. Fear, maybe, or guilt. He blinked, then looked away again, fingers tapping the edge of the table in a rapid rhythm. "Boxes?" "Yes," she said quietly. "Not just boxes. Documents, papers I never signed, accounts I never opened, drawings, journals." He went very still. She softened her voice. "There was a journal in your handwriting, Tommy. From 2007. His hand froze mid-tap. "You wrote about a room," she said. "About hearing someone inside it." Tommy's throat bobbed. I was a kid. You were writing about things no child should know." He rubbed his jaw. Still not looking at her. "I made stuff up back then. I always had nightmares, remember?" "Tommy," she said gently but firmly. "Did you help them? David and Lena? Did you know what they were doing?" Silence. His hands trembled. He grabbed them, squeezing his fingers together like he could keep them still by force. "I'm not angry," she said. "I just need to know. Did you know?" He finally met her eyes, and for a brief second there was something in them, something raw and pleading. A child looking through a grown man's face. "I didn't stop them," he whispered. "That's not the same." Her heart caught. "What did they do?" she asked, voice breaking. "Tell me. Tommy." He stood up so fast his chair screeched across the floor, pacing now, breathing heavy. "They were already in it," he muttered. "By the time I found out, it was too far gone. David had everything in place. Lena was always pushing it further. I didn't even understand most of it." "But you knew," Janet said. He nodded slowly. "Why didn't you come to me?" He turned toward her, face suddenly sharp. "Because you didn't want to know. You never wanted to see it. You were so busy grieving Dad you didn't even see us falling apart." Janet flinched. "I thought," he said, softer now, "if I left it alone, it would stop. That maybe they'd grow out of it. Or get caught. Or something." "But they didn't." He shook his head. "They got better at it." A silence fell between them, thick with unsaid years. Janet stood walking to him. She placed her hand lightly on his shoulder. "It's not too late to tell me the truth." His voice came out hoarse. "Please, Mom. Don't dig anymore. Just let it go." She searched his face. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, like the guilt had chewed through him slowly. But beneath it all, she saw something else. Fear. Not of her. Of something bigger. She pulled her hand back. I can't let it go. Tommy looked away and said nothing. The rain started as she drove home, thin at first, barely more than a mist across the windshield. By the time she reached the driveway, it was coming down hard enough that the world outside her window blurred into watercolor. She sat there for a while, engine off, hands in her lap, listening to the steady drumming of water on the roof. Inside, the house was dark and waiting. Cold. The hallway clock ticked louder than usual. Her shoes echoed too sharp against the hardwood. Janet moved into the kitchen like she was sleepwalking. The table was still covered, documents fanned out in quiet chaos, sticky notes curling at the edges, and the notebook half filled with dates and details. The pages looked like confessions, evidence, autopsies. She stood over them, and something inside her cracked. A low sound came from her throat, almost a sob, almost a laugh. She covered her mouth with both hands as her knees buckled, and she dropped to the floor beside the table. The tears came hot and fast, no longer silent. They broke out in waves, ugly, gasping sobs that racked her chest and curled her shoulders inward. She hadn't cried like this since the day they lowered Harold into the ground, not at the funeral. Not at the bank. Not even when the last of the condolence cards stopped coming. This grief was different. This grief was betrayal soaked in memory. She curled into herself on the cold tile, whispering one name at a time. David, Lena, Tommy. Over and over. She had given them everything. Flashback, 2001, Janet in a greasy apron, hunched over a register at the gas station, punching numbers with fingers blistered from scrubbing floors. Tommy asleep in the back seat of her rusted Ford as she counted out gas money in quarters. A single turkey sandwich split 3 ways. Lena's voice, small and sharp. It's okay, Mom. I'm not that hungry. Flashback. 2008, double shifts at the hospital. Knee pain ignored, phone calls missed, birthday candles bought on clearance, coming home to find David watching over the stove, stirring macaroni with one hand, holding Tommy's math homework with the other. She'd cried then too. Happy tears. Proud ones. Back then, she believed sacrifice was currency. That the more she gave, the more they'd carry her forward. She whispered now, barely audible. All for them. She pressed her forehead to the tile. All of it. Her body shook until the tears finally ran dry, until there was nothing left but the ache. She sat up slowly, wiping her face with her sleeve. Her legs were numb, her throat raw. Her eyes landed on the edge of the table, where a manila envelope had fallen, its contents halfway spilled. A credit card application, dated 2 years ago. Her name, her forged signature. Another lie, another theft. Another weight hung around her neck like an anchor. Janet reached for the envelope with both hands and stared at it. The ache in her chest twisted, then began to cool, slowly, quietly, like molten steel hardening into shape. Forgiveness. That had always been her instinct. Even when David got suspended senior year and swore it was a misunderstanding. Even when Lena stole $20 from her purse and cried when she was caught. Even when Tommy vanished for 2 nights and came back with a stitched lip and bloodied knuckles. She had always wanted to believe they'd grow out of it, that they were good kids just going through something hard, but that illusion was dead now. She looked at the forged loan in her lap. They hadn't just taken her money, they had taken her belief in them. She stood up. Her hands no longer shook. She moved to the corkboard on the far wall and pinned the loan at the center. Then she picked up her notebook and began writing again. Not dates this time. Intentions. Create backup copies of all documents. List each fraudulent account tied to her name. Research legal recourse. Find an attorney who doesn't scare easy. She clicked the pen shut. There was no more room for heartbreak. Only strategy. Only fire. only war. The waiting room was quiet in a way that made Janet's nerves louder. A muted aquarium bubbled in the corner. Faded paintings of Pennsylvania farms hung crooked on beige walls. The receptionist, a young woman with earbuds half hidden under her hair, didn't even look up as Janet signed in. She sat on the edge of a vinyl chair, knees pressed together, hands tight in her lap. Her fingers trembled despite the layers of tissues clutched between them. The folder on the seat beside her looked innocuous, ordinary, like it might hold recipes or coupons. But inside, it held her children's crimes. Janet Hale? Her head jerked up. A man in his early 60s stood at the office doorway, his gray suit rumpled but clean. His nameplate had read Clifford Decker Esquisser. When she Googled him, small-town lawyer, ex-military, mostly estates and contract disputes. But he came highly recommended by Carla's cousin, and more importantly, he wasn't family. She followed him down a narrow hallway into a room filled with leather chairs and soft lighting, not cozy, controlled. "Please," he said, gesturing to the seat across from his desk. "I read over the message you sent. Said you had questions about some property and loan activity." Janet opened the folder with shaking hands. Her voice nearly caught in her throat. "I think my children committed fraud in my name. Over a period of years." Clifford didn't flinch. Instead, he took the folder calmly and laid the documents out across his desk with a practiced hand. He read in silence for what felt like hours, flipping, scanning, jotting occasional notes. Finally, he leaned back. "Well," he said, adjusting his glasses, "you weren't wrong." Janet blinked. "You mean they're fake?" "Oh, they're real enough to ruin you. That's the problem." Her breath caught. He tapped the first page. "This loan here? It's legally binding. Your name, your SSN, your address. Whoever forged this, they were good. But if you never signed it, and we can prove that, then yes, this constitutes fraud, and possibly identity theft. Multiple counts." He moved to another page. "Same here. This refinance in 2017. Cross-referencing with your tax return. Clearly not your income. And this student loan? It names you as a co-signer, but there's no record of your authorization in the submission metadata." Janet stared down at her hands. They looked small now. Fragile. Like a child's. "But these are still connected to me?" she asked. "Credit-wise, yes. Until we challenge them formally and provide documentation, they stay on your record. Debt, liability, potential tax exposure." He stopped when he saw her eyes glaze. "I know it's a lot," he said gently, "but it's fixable. You're not alone." She nodded slowly, but her stomach churned. "And to fix it?" she asked, voice tight. "What happens?" He folded his hands. "We open a formal investigation, notify the institutions involved, provide handwriting samples and proof of identity. I can subpoena access logs if needed. Depending on how aggressive you want to be, we can file criminal charges: fraud, conspiracy, mail fraud, elder abuse." She flinched at the last one. "That would mean testifying." He hesitated, then nodded. "If it goes to court, yes. You'd be the plaintiff. Your children would be the defendants." Janet's throat closed. "I'd have to look them in the eyes." "And say they betrayed you," he said. "Yes." She stared at the polished wood of the desk, her reflection warped across its surface. "Could I take back the house?" she asked softly. "Yes," he said without pause. "Depending on how the funds were moved. If any of these loans were collateralized against your property, and they likely were, you could push for asset seizure and reversal of title transfer. It wouldn't be fast, but it's doable." She looked up slowly. "I just wanted to be their mother," she whispered. "Now I have to become their executioner." Clifford's voice was steady. "No. You'd be the one finally drawing a line. There's a difference." Silence settled over the room like ash. Janet stared at the documents again. One of them, Lena's forged loan, still had a coffee ring on the corner, like it had once sat in her kitchen, disguised as harmless. She reached forward and ran her fingertip along the edge of the page. The chair beneath her creaked as she sat up straighter. "They made that choice," she said quietly. "I'm just living with the consequences." Clifford nodded once. "So what do you want to do?" Janet's grip tightened on the chair's armrest. Her voice came out low, cold, final. "They left me no choice." The restaurant was the kind of place with dim lighting and overpriced cocktails, downtown, just far enough from the suburbs to feel special, but not too far to scare off the well-dressed crowd. Janet stepped out of the Uber, her scarf tucked tightly around her neck. She hadn't asked for dinner, hadn't wanted it, but the group text had come from Lena that morning. "Birthday dinner for Mom. 7 p.m. sharp. Our treat." She almost didn't reply, but curiosity could be sharper than grief. Inside, David and Lena were already seated at a corner booth, waving her over with manic smiles. Tommy arrived moments after she did, face drawn and collar askew. "Look at you," Lena chirped, standing to air kiss her cheek. "Still wearing scarves like it's 2002. I swear you don't age." "Happy birthday, Mom," David said, pulling out her chair. "You made it another year without murdering any of us." She smiled, cool and practiced. "Not yet." Menus flapped open. Small talk dripped from their mouths like syrup. David talking about some real estate client, Lena griping about her trainer's vacation, Tommy mumbling about a freelance gig he was thinking about taking. Janet just nodded, stirred her water. Said very little. It was surreal, watching them pretend to be what they weren't. Grown, stable, loving. The waiter brought wine, then appetizers. Everything fried, expensive, and Instagram-worthy. When the check arrived, after 2 cocktails, 3 courses, and a slice of cake, David reached for his wallet with theatrical flair. "I've got this," he said, sliding his card into the check folder like a magician revealing the final trick. But the waiter lingered. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "This card's declined. Do you have another?" David froze. "That's impossible." He chuckled, trying to keep it light. "I literally paid off that balance 2 days ago." Tommy shifted in his seat, eyes locked on his glass. Lena groaned dramatically. "Oh my God, David. Seriously? This is so you." She reached into her clutch and handed over a different card. "It'll go through," she told the waiter. "I used it for gas this morning." Another pause. Another polite apology. Declined. Janet's heart thudded once, hard. Her face didn't change. David looked at Lena, who hissed under her breath, "Try yours." Tommy fumbled for his wallet but stopped when Janet, smiling sweetly, pulled a crisp 100 from her purse and laid it gently on the table. "Happy to cover my own birthday," she said. The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. "You don't have to do that," David muttered. "I insist." Lena laughed too loudly. "Mom, you're such a hero. Always bailing us out. Some things never change." Janet folded her napkin neatly. "No, they really don't." Tommy didn't speak. He hadn't all night. But now, briefly, he looked at her, and she saw it again. That flicker of something human. Guilt? Regret? She didn't look away. When the waiter returned with change, she waved it off. "Keep it." They stood outside minutes later, the air colder than it had been all week. The parking lot was slick with light rain, glinting beneath the sodium lamps. "Well," Lena said, clutching her designer coat tighter. "That was fun. We'll do something bigger next year," David added. "You deserve it." Janet offered each of them a hug, brief, perfunctory. When she stepped toward Tommy, he didn't move. She let the distance hang. "I think I'll walk a bit," she said, tucking her purse beneath her arm. Lena blinked. "In those shoes? You sure?" "Very." They didn't follow. She walked past the valet stand, past the rows of cars, into the city's edge, where the sidewalk cracked and the glow of the restaurant dimmed behind her. With every step, she felt her resolve tighten, hardening, locking into place like teeth. They were gone. Not physically, but spiritually. The children she'd raised, protected, fed, clothed, forgiven, had hollowed themselves out and filled the space with theft and entitlement. Tonight wasn't reconciliation. It was their final audition for innocence. And they'd failed. The first frost had dusted the rooftops white by the time Janet pulled into Mr. Russo's driveway. It was early. The sun had barely broken the ridge of pines that lined the street, but his garage door was already open, the familiar clang of tools echoing faintly into the chilled morning air. She got out of the car with slow, deliberate steps. The wind tugged at her coat. Her breath hung in front of her like smoke. Russo emerged from the side door, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. Well, he said. "Figured I'd hear from you again. Not many leaks talk back." Janet almost smiled. "I owe you a thank you." "You don't owe me anything, ma'am. You asked me to check a wall. I checked it." "What you found behind it?" He shook his head. "That wasn't plumbing." She nodded. Her fingers curled inside her sleeves. "I don't expect you to remember what you said," she murmured, "but you told me something that stuck. That this house had secrets. That they rot faster than mold." Russo leaned against the frame of the garage. "That's the truth. You ignore 'em long enough, they'll collapse the whole place." She looked up at him, eyes rimmed red but steady. "Well," she said, "I'm done ignoring them." For a moment neither spoke, just the creak of a wind chime swaying somewhere behind the house. Then Russo gave her a slow, respectful nod. Not dramatic, not pitying, just solid. "Good," he said. "It's time." That afternoon, Janet sat in her kitchen with Carla, both women hunched over cups of cooling coffee. "Are you absolutely sure?" Carla asked, her voice low, cautious. Janet didn't look up. She was sorting papers again, but this time not frantically. Not with panic, but purpose. Every folder was labeled, every form paired with a timeline, an annotation, a record. "I wasn't sure about anything for a long time," she said. "I thought being a good mother meant covering for them, absorbing it, making excuses." She placed a copy of The Forged Power of Attorney in the center of the stack. "But what kind of mother lets her kids believe they can walk all over her and call it love?" Carla exhaled slowly. "If you want me there in court, I'll come." Janet looked up. "I mean it," Carla said. "I'll sit behind you. I'll hold your damn purse if I have to." A laugh escaped Janet's throat, sharp and unexpected. Not mocking, just real. "You always did like drama." Carla raised her mug. "And I always hated thieves." Janet nodded. "Then come." The county clerk's office smelled like floor polish and paper dust. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering once before settling. Janet stood at the counter with the manila envelope tucked under her arm like it was loaded. The clerk, a woman no older than Lena, asked without looking up, "What are we filing today?" "Affidavit of fraud," Janet said. Her voice didn't waver. The clerk glanced up then, eyebrows raised. "You the plaintiff?" "Yes." "Against?" Janet opened the envelope, slid out the forms, and said the names out loud for the first time. Not as her children. Not as memories. As defendants. David Hale, Lena Burke, Thomas Hale. The clerk didn't react. Just flipped through the pages, checking signatures. "And you understand these filings will initiate an investigation?" "I do." "And if verified, could result in prosecution?" "Yes." The clerk took the stack, fed them one by one through the date stamping machine. With each motion, the heavy clunk of the press echoed through the glass-fronted room like a gavel. Thunk, thunk, thunk. It sounded like judgment. It sounded like a door slamming behind them all. Janet didn't blink. She signed the final line and pushed the pen across the counter. Outside, Carla stood by the entrance, arms crossed tightly over her coat. She didn't ask for details, just fell in step as Janet emerged. As they walked toward the car, the wind picked up, scattering a few yellow leaves across the parking lot. Carla slipped her hand gently through Janet's elbow. "You okay?" Janet didn't answer right away. She looked up at the cloudless sky. Clear, bare, honest. And for the first time in years, so was she. She exhaled, slow and measured, then whispered, "It's begun." Janet heard the pounding on the door before she even reached the hallway. Not knocking, pounding. By the time she opened it, David was already halfway through his second breathless accusation. "What the hell are you telling people, Mom?" He stood on her porch in a charcoal overcoat, hair wind-blown, jaw clenched. His voice came fast, sharp. There was no greeting. No warmth. Janet stepped aside without a word. Inside, he paced the living room like a caged dog. The curtains were drawn. The wood stove clicked softly as it cooled. On the coffee table, a thick stack of legal documents sat waiting, clipped and labeled. "You filed something, didn't you?" he snapped. "I got a call from my accountant, then from the bank, and now Lena's blowing up my phone. What did you do?" Janet didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She sat down and pushed the folder forward. "You should read what I found," she said, "before you keep lying." David stared at the folder, then her. "I'm not—" She cut him off with a look. He opened the folder. Loan documents, power of attorney, credit card statements, property records, every page marked, every signature tied back to him, and everyone forged. He didn't flip through long. His fingers curled into fists. "You went digging," he said, voice low. "I went remembering," Janet replied. "There's a difference." He turned away, then turned back. "I needed help, okay? After Dad died, everything fell apart. You were a wreck. The hospital bills. Lena's tuition. I handled what you couldn't." "You didn't handle anything," she said. "You hijacked it. Quietly. Over years. Behind my back." David's jaw tensed. "I didn't steal. I kept things afloat." "You didn't just steal," she said, standing. "You used me. You wore my grief like a disguise and took everything that wasn't nailed down." He opened his mouth, shut it, looked down at the folder again, then up at her, this time without fury, without denial, just something closer to fear. "You're really going through with this?" "I already have." His shoulders sagged, just slightly. "This is going to destroy everything. Do you understand that?" Janet crossed her arms. "No," she said. "It already did." He stared at her, like she'd become someone he couldn't read anymore. Then he left. No goodbye, no apology, just the slam of the door hard enough to rattle the windows. 3 days later, Lena arrived without warning. Her car screeched into the driveway. Janet saw her through the kitchen window, slamming the door and marching up the steps in heels she couldn't walk in. The rage radiated off her like heat. Janet opened the door before she could knock. Lena shoved her way in. "You unbelievable bitch." Janet blinked. "Hello, Lena." "You filed against your own children?" she shrieked, arms flailing. "You went to the courts?" "You stole from me," Janet said, calm as a glacier. Repeatedly. Lena laughed, loud and cracked. "This is your revenge for not calling more, right? For not visiting enough? For outgrowing you?" "No," Janet said. "This is me drawing a line. Something you've never respected." Lena grabbed the nearest object, an empty glass from the table, and flung it across the room. It hit the wall and shattered. "You've ruined my life," she hissed. "My credit's frozen. Mason's private school tuition bounced. My husband is talking divorce." Janet stepped forward. "You forged my name. You drained my accounts. You left me drowning while you lived like royalty. If you're looking for someone to blame, use a mirror." Tears welled in Lena's eyes, but they didn't soften her. They twisted her face, warped her voice into something unrecognizable. "We're your children. You don't do this to family." Janet's voice was cold now, precise. "You did." Lena shook her head, breathing fast, mascara streaking down her cheek. "This isn't over. You think you're in control, but you're not. We're going to fight this. And you'll lose. You'll die alone in this stupid house and no one will care." Janet moved past her, picking up the broken glass with a towel. "I already was," she said softly. Lena didn't respond. She stormed out. Janet locked the door behind her, then leaned her back against it, eyes closed, hands trembling, not from fear anymore, but from sheer release. No more masks, no more pretending. They'd shown her who they really were. Now the world would see it too. The courthouse smelled like paper, waxed tile, and nerves. Janet stood just inside the entryway, her coat clutched too tightly in one hand, the other wrapped around her purse like a lifeline. Her heels tapped softly as she crossed the lobby. The sound reminded her of walking hospital floors during overnight shifts, measured, numb, too exhausted to be afraid. Courtroom 3B was half full. She spotted them immediately. David in a gray suit too tight in the shoulders. Lena in a charcoal dress with padded shoulders and a pearl necklace she hadn't earned. They sat side by side, stone-faced, backs unnaturally straight, united in defense, united in delusion. Tommy sat 3 seats apart. He was pale, hunched, wringing his hands beneath the table like he wanted to disappear into them. He didn't look up when she entered. Didn't look at them either. Carla touched Janet's shoulder gently. "Want me to sit right behind you?" Janet nodded, breathing shallow. "Please." They made their way to the plaintiff's side. Clifford Decker was already there, reviewing notes, calm and collected as ever. He stood as Janet approached and gave her the smallest of nods. "You still sure?" he asked under his breath. Janet's voice was quiet, but firm. "More than ever." The bailiff called the room to order, voice booming against the carved ceiling. "All rise." The judge entered, an older woman with a lined face and a stare like frost. She looked over her reading glasses as she reviewed the case file already in front of her. When she spoke, her voice cut through the tension like a gavel. "Case 4C412, Hale v. Hale et al. Matter of alleged identity fraud and unauthorized financial abuse." Janet exhaled slowly. David leaned into his lawyer's ear. Lena crossed her legs tightly, glaring straight ahead like she was in a beauty pageant and this was her final round. The judge adjusted her glasses. "I've reviewed the preliminary materials," she said. "We'll begin with a brief summary from the plaintiff." Clifford stood and spoke with measured cadence, laying out the timeline. Death of spouse, power of attorney, suspicious accounts, eventual discovery. He emphasized the pattern, the control exerted by the defendants, the consistent forging of Janet's signature, the exploitation of grief. Then he stepped back. The courtroom was quiet when Janet stood. Her hands trembled at first, but her voice did not. "I didn't come here to punish them," she said, eyes locked forward. "I came here because I had no choice. I was a widow, a mother. I trusted them to protect me when I couldn't see straight. And instead, they used that moment to carve out their own kingdoms in my name." She opened her folder, held up a document. "This is my name, my social security number, my credit. But this? She held the page up for a moment. This signature? It's not mine. I never saw this loan application. I never consented to this refinance. I never approved this credit line. She lowered her hands. But I paid the price. The judge nodded once, her expression unreadable. Defense attorneys for David and Lena offered their opening remarks: hedging language, misunderstanding, miscommunication, grief. All the words Janet had lived under for too long. At one point, Lena whispered furiously to her attorney, gesturing toward Janet like a petulant child in detention. The judge didn't blink. "Save it for the affidavits," she said flatly. "This is a preliminary hearing, not a reality show." Tommy was never called to speak. He kept his eyes on the floor. The judge reviewed a few of the documents herself, flipping through the stack with growing impatience. "The consistency of the forged signature patterns," she said, tapping the desk with her pen, "is damning." David shifted in his seat. Lena's cheeks flushed red. After 2 hours, the judge looked up. "I will not rule today," she said. "Further review is necessary. I will issue a continuance within 30 days. In the meantime, all accounts in question will remain frozen. Plaintiff may proceed with discovery. Defendants are not to tamper with any financial records pending further order." The gavel came down hard. Adjourned. The courtroom erupted into a slow shuffle of feet, hushed whispers, and the crackling zip of folders and briefcases. Janet didn't move. Not right away. Her legs felt like stone. But her spine? Her spine had never been straighter. David wouldn't look at her. Lena brushed past her in the aisle, muttering something Janet didn't catch. Only Tommy paused. He looked at her. Really looked. And opened his mouth. But whatever he meant to say fell apart before it reached his lips. Janet held his gaze. Just long enough for him to know, it's not too late to choose the right side. Then she turned and walked out into the October sun. The snow had started falling again by nightfall, fat, quiet flakes drifting under the porch light in soft spirals. Janet stood in the living room, folding a quilt with methodical precision, when headlights swept across the front windows. She peeked through the curtain. A car idled in the driveway. Too old to be David's, too beat up to be Lena's. Tommy. She opened the door before he could knock. He stood on the porch, no coat, jeans soaked to the knees, his sweatshirt thin and spotted with salt from the street. His face was blotchy, red, eyes swollen, tears fresh. "Mom," he choked. She said nothing, just held the door frame. "I didn't know where else to go." His voice cracked like a branch splitting under weight. I can't sleep. I can't think. I'm so—" He doubled over, bracing his hands on his thighs, sobs ripping loose with no warning. Janet's breath caught in her throat. She stepped back, letting the screen door fall shut between them. He pressed his forehead to it. "They made me," he cried. "David and Lena, God, they wouldn't stop. They said I owed them. That if I didn't help, I'd be the reason you lost the house." Janet's heart pounded, but her face stayed still. She'd trained herself not to flinch. Not anymore. "I forged 2 documents," he confessed, brokenly. "Just 2. I didn't understand the rest. They said they'd fix it later. Said it was just to get us through the month. I didn't even get anything from it." She watched him slide down to sit on the porch steps, hands buried in his hair. "I just wanted you to be proud of me," he said. "Not, God, not this." She finally spoke. "You wanted my approval, so you helped them rob me." He looked up, ashamed. "I didn't mean to, I swear." "You think that changes the cost?" "No," he said. "But I'll pay it. I'll help fix it. I'll do anything." Janet stepped forward, standing on the other side of the screen. For a moment she saw him as a boy again, skinned knees, comic books, the sound of him humming while drawing monsters at the kitchen table. But that boy was gone, and in his place was this man, trembling, soaked, caught between the damage he'd done and the mother he didn't know how to face. She wanted to open the door, to cradle his head and say it was okay, that he was forgiven. But lies were what had poisoned them in the first place. Her voice was soft, barely audible over the snow. Forgiveness isn't free. Tommy's lips parted like he was going to beg again, but no words came. She didn't slam the door. She just closed it. Gently, firmly, leaving him on the other side, in the drifting snow, with nothing but silence and his guilt for warmth. The second court session was colder than the first, mid-December now, with wind that cut through wool. Janet's gloved hands trembled slightly, but only from the weather. Not nerves, not anymore. Courtroom 3B was fuller this time. The tension had ripened into something denser. Reporters hadn't shown, yet, but word had spread. The clerk's glance lingered a second longer when Janet walked in, manila folders stacked under one arm, scarf tucked firm at her throat. Carla stood and gave her a nod. Her lips curved into a soft smile, one of solidarity, not pity. Clifford Decker was already seated. He looked up from his notes and tapped the bench beside him. "You ready?" Janet's voice was quiet. "I've been ready for years. I just didn't know it." Across the aisle, David sat stiff in another poorly tailored suit, the kind that tried too hard to look expensive. His jaw was clenched, arms crossed. Lena was beside him, thinner than before, pale. Her pearls were gone. So was the fire. Her leg bounced beneath the table, jittery and panicked. Tommy wasn't there. The judge entered, black robes trailing, hair tied back. Same lined face, same glassy stare over the rim of her bifocals. She got right to it. This court has reviewed over 40 exhibits of financial documentation, including loan records, signature analysis, property deeds, and bank account transfers. Her gaze lifted. "Ms. Hale, please proceed with your testimony." Janet stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just laid the story out like a surgeon with a scalpel, measured, deliberate, every piece fitting exactly where it needed to land. She passed forward evidence one page at a time, narrated calmly: the forged refinance, the student loans, the power of attorney she only signed once, and never again. The accounts opened in her name while she worked double shifts. The credit card charges to salons, resorts, and boutiques she'd never stepped foot in. The room stayed silent. Even the lawyers for David and Lena didn't object often. Each protest weaker than the last, each one drowned beneath the weight of proof. When it was their turn, Lena went first. She tried tears, tried playing the victim, talked about pressure, confusion, family responsibilities. But the judge cut her off after 5 minutes. "This isn't a therapy session," she said, dry as winter. "It's a fraud case." David fared worse. He tried logic, claimed consent, financial misunderstanding, family trust. Clifford calmly pulled out the digital signature audit trail. The judge's eyes narrowed. "You signed for her on 6 different loans, Mr. Hale. She wasn't even in the state for 3 of them." David said nothing after that. By the time it ended, Janet had said everything she needed to say. The judge leaned back, removed her glasses, and gave the room a long, level look. "This court finds that Janet Hale did not knowingly consent to the financial actions taken in her name. The evidence overwhelmingly points to systematic fraud perpetrated by David Hale and Lena Burke." The air shifted. Lena inhaled sharply like she'd been punched in the chest. David dropped his eyes. The judge continued, unflinching. "Restitution will be addressed in the penalty phase. For now, we order the removal of all fraudulent debts from Ms. Hale's credit report." Title to the Hale property remains in her name exclusively. All contested accounts shall be transferred back to her control. Proceedings against the defendants will continue. Gavel. Sharp. Final. Court adjourned. The courtroom exhaled. Janet didn't. Not yet. She rose slowly, her shoulders back, her grip firm on the folder in her hands. Carla reached for her coat. As they passed David and Lena's table, Janet didn't glance their way. But they both looked at her. Lena's face had collapsed into something hollow. Shock. Disbelief. Some cocktail of entitlement and defeat. David's expression was flat. Stunned. Like a man watching a house he thought was his go up in smoke. Janet stepped through the courthouse doors into the bright, frozen air. No wind could chill her now. Carla walked beside her, quiet for a moment. Then she said simply, "You did it." Janet nodded. Not triumphant, not smug, just steady. "I did," she said, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt seen. The front door creaked open into soft light. Janet stepped inside and let the silence take her. The house was warm, the air still holding the faint scent of wood polish and pine cleaner. Afternoon sun filtered through the living room curtains, casting long golden streaks across the floor. A soft hum came from the refrigerator. Nothing else moved. She closed the door behind her and stood for a moment, letting the quiet settle into her chest. Then, without a word, she walked to the basement door. Her hand hesitated on the knob, not from fear, but memory. For so long, this door had guarded more than pipes and storage. It had hidden rot, lies, a whole era of silence masquerading as peace. She opened it. The stairs creaked in familiar protest beneath her weight. Cold air drifted up to meet her, but it wasn't sharp anymore. Just cool, earthy, and still. She took each step slowly, her hand brushing the chipped rail, her breath steady. At the bottom, she turned on the light. The bulb overhead flickered once. Then it held. The basement looked different now. Not physically, not much. The old washer still leaned slightly to one side. The boiler in the corner still hissed its tired rhythm. But the shadows were gone. The walls felt wider. The air, lighter. The shelves along the far wall were empty. No boxes, no journals, no envelopes hiding sins. Just space. She walked to the furnace, touching it briefly with her fingers. Warm. Constant. Then she pulled over a wooden chair and sat down beside it. She didn't cry, didn't shake. She just sat, spine straight, palms resting on her knees, as if she were holding court in the one place that had once tried to bury her. A few minutes later, footsteps creaked above. Then the basement door opened and Carla's voice called down softly. "That wine still on offer?" Janet smiled faintly. "Come in." Carla descended, a bottle and 2 glasses in hand. She moved easily without tiptoeing. No fear, no reverence, just presence. "Thought I'd find you down here," she said. "I needed to feel it," Janet said. "The quiet." Carla poured. The wine was red, bold, poured carefully into mismatched glasses. They sipped in silence for a few minutes, the way old friends can without apology. Finally, Janet spoke. "It's clean now." Carla glanced around. "The basement?" Janet nodded, eyes fixed on the empty shelf across from her. "The house. Me. All of it." A beat passed. Then Carla clinked her glass gently against Janet's. "To clean basements," she said, a small smile tugging at her mouth. "And the women who dare go into them." Janet smiled back, tired but content. "And come out the other side." Above them, the sun dipped behind the trees, casting soft gold into the cracks of the house. The furnace clicked, warming the pipes that had once groaned in protest. Now they sighed like something released. Janet finished her glass and stood slowly. Her joints ached, but they didn't weigh her down. She stretched her back and looked once more at the place where the false wall had been. Nothing there now but brick and air. "Let's go up," she said. Carla followed her, pausing only to switch off the light. The basement slipped into shadow, but it didn't feel like hiding anymore. It felt like rest. Upstairs, the house glowed. Soft lamps. Old photographs returned to their rightful places. The hum of music barely audible from the kitchen radio. The scent of something baking. An apple pie, maybe. Or bread rising. Janet stepped into her living room and stood by the window. Outside, the snow had stopped. The street was quiet. The porch light flicked on with the timer, casting a soft halo over the front steps. Carla settled into the armchair, legs tucked under her. Janet turned toward the hallway, the one that led to the rooms where her children had once slept, dreamed, lied. She didn't resent the past. She just no longer lived in it. She walked to the table, picked up a photo from a small frame and set it face down. And then, finally, she sat beside her friend, leaned back, and let the warmth of her home hold her. Not haunted, not used, just home.